It was Wednesday night, a little after 9, when the call came in. I know because the microwave clock blinked 9:03 in bright green as I heard my phone buzz on the counter. I was in the middle of reheating some leftover pizza, a guilty pleasure, especially since I had sworn off takeout as part of my self-improvement plan. When I saw her name on the screen, a wave of dread hit me. I hadn't heard from Emily in 3 days, not since we'd fought about, well, everything. Work, money, free time, faith. I couldn't blame her for being fed up with me. Hell, most days I was fed up with myself too. I stood there for a moment, unsure if I should pick up. Finally, I did. "Hey," I said, trying to sound nonchalant, even though my stomach was in knots. There was a long pause, the kind that always feels heavy, like the other person is weighing their words carefully. "Hi, James," she said, her voice small, almost fragile. "Can we talk?" My throat felt tight. "Yeah, sure. What's going on?" Another pause. Then she exhaled deeply. "I can't do this anymore." Her words hit me like a sucker punch. "What do you mean?" "Emily, please, we can—" "Don't," she interrupted, her voice trembling. "I've been trying for months, James, but it's always something. Every time I think we're okay, you slip away." "I haven't touched a drink in 137 days. I shot back, defensive. "I'm doing everything I can." "I know, and that's great," she said, her tone soft but firm. "But it's not just the drinking. It's the way you shut me out. The way you push me away every time I try to help." "I'm trying," I said, my voice wavering. "I love you. I love you too," she replied. And I knew right then that it was over. I could hear it in her voice, resigned, final. "But I'm not the one who can save you. You need something stronger than I can be." I wanted to argue, beg her to stay, but all I could do was grip the phone tightly, like it was the only thing keeping me upright. "I hope you find peace, James," she said after a long silence. "I'll be praying for you, for the help you need." Then the line went dead. I don't remember hanging up. I don't remember the pizza burning in the microwave or the phone slipping out of my hand. What I do remember is standing in front of the cabinet above the fridge, my breath coming in shallow bursts as I stared at the bottle of Jack Daniels I had hidden away, just in case I really needed it. My sponsor would have had a field day with me. "A safety net is just a noose with extra steps," he'd say. But I'd always been too scared to get rid of it, just like I'd been too scared to open it, until now. My hand trembled as I reached for the bottle. It felt cold and smooth in my palm, almost comforting. I flipped it over, watching the amber liquid slosh inside. For a moment, I thought about Emily's voice, how it cracked when she said goodbye. I thought about the 137 days I had fought to crawl out of the hole I'd dug for myself. I thought about every prayer my AA group had forced me to say, every time Emily had dragged me to church. I hated it all. I hated that I wasn't fixed. I hated that I didn't feel saved. I hated, and then something shifted. One moment, I was in my kitchen, staring at the bottle, not ready to make a decision. The next, I was sitting in a plush leather chair, the thick scent of cigar smoke and bourbon in the air. The kitchen was gone. The bottle was gone. Around me, there was the hum of jazz music and the quiet murmur of conversations. I blinked, disoriented, and looked up. A man in a sharp black vest stood behind the bar, polishing a glass with slow, deliberate movements. When he saw me, he smiled. "Rough night, James?" he asked, his voice smooth as velvet. I opened my mouth to answer, but no words came out. How the hell did he know my name? The bartender tilted his head, the smile widening just enough to make me uneasy. "James," he said, almost as if savoring it. "Welcome back to the rag and bone shop." I glanced around, trying to figure out where I was. The room was dim, the walls made of dark wood polished to a high shine, and the light from a few lamps threw long, flickering shadows across the floor. A soft jazz tune played from a record player, its crackling sound blending with the quiet murmurs of the other people in the bar. None of them seemed to notice me. I started, my voice faltering. "I didn't mean to come here." The bartender chuckled lightly. "Most don't," he said, setting down the glass he'd been polishing. His hands were spotless, his nails perfectly manicured. "But here you are." "I was at home," I said, almost rushing the words out. "In my kitchen. I had a bottle in your hand," he interrupted smoothly. "Jack Daniels, if I'm not mistaken. An old friend, right?" My stomach churned. "How do you know that?" He leaned in, resting his elbows on the bar and lacing his fingers together. His eyes, dark and piercing, locked onto mine. "Let's just say I recognize a man at a crossroads when I see one." I tore my gaze away, glancing at the drink menu on the bar. There were no prices listed. My throat went dry, and I licked my lips. "I don't want a drink," I said firmly, pushing the menu away. "Of course you don't," the bartender said, his tone like he was humoring a child. "You're just here to soak up the atmosphere?" I stood up, the stool scraping against the floor. "I'm leaving." The bartender didn't move, but his smile grew. "You're welcome to try," he said, "but you might find the doors not as close as you think." I turned toward the door, my heart racing. It wasn't far, just a few steps. But the closer I got, the further it seemed to stretch, like I was wading through thick mud. "Why the rush, James?" the bartender called after me. "Sit down. Have a drink. Relax a bit. You've earned it." I didn't stop, didn't look back. The door was right there, just a few more steps. Then I heard the clink of glass against wood, and my feet froze. "Do you remember the first time you drank?" the bartender asked. "I bet you do. Everyone remembers their first. That warm feeling in your chest, like the world tilted in your favor for once." I turned my head just enough to catch him in my peripheral vision. He was leaning casually against the bar, swirling a glass of amber liquid. The ice cubes clinked softly as he took a slow sip. "Do you remember how it felt, James? To just let go, even if it was only for a little while?" "Shut up," I said, my voice trembling. He ignored me, savoring his drink like it was the best thing he'd ever tasted. "That's the thing about alcohol, isn't it? It's a liar, a cheat. But damn, does it make you feel alive?" I turned to face him fully, my anger outweighing the fear that had been holding me back. I said, "I'm not drinking. I don't want anything from you." The bartender smirked and placed his glass down with a soft clink. "We'll see," he said. That's when I noticed the other people in the bar, all of them watching me. Their faces were pale, blank, their eyes glazed over. The bartender snapped his fingers to get my attention. "Come on, James. Sit down. Let's talk. No pressure. Just a little perspective." Without thinking, my legs moved toward the stool. I sat back down in front of him. He raised an eyebrow, amused. "There we go," he said. Reaching beneath the bar, he pulled out a silver flask, my initials engraved on it. My chest tightened. I hadn't seen that flask in years. Not since I'd thrown it into the river after rehab. "How?" I started. "It has a way of finding its way back to you," the bartender said with a sharp smile. "Funny how that works, huh?" I stared at the flask, my mind racing. The door behind us opened, letting in a gust of cold air. "Who's this handsome guy?" a soft, feminine voice asked. I turned, and there she was. "You wanted to see what you're returning to, Michael. You don't get to escape the truth that easily." I stood frozen, my heart hammering in my chest as I watched myself on the screen. The image of me, drunk, disheveled, and lost, familiar, yet utterly alien, made my stomach twist. It was as if I were looking at a ghost, someone who had long since given up. The man on the screen staggered across the room, tripping over a pile of broken furniture, and collapsed in a heap on the floor. His face was flushed, his eyes glazed over in a way I knew all too well. He looked like a man who had stopped fighting. Couldn't breathe. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't look away either. "You think you can fix yourself?" The bartender's voice sliced through the air like a razor. "You think walking away from this place will make it go away?" His laugh was low and mocking. "You're just running from what's already inside of you." "I'm not like that anymore," I said, my voice hoarse. trembling with a mix of defiance and fear. I've changed. I've been fighting. Every day. For 137 days. The number sounded hollow in my ears. Lydia's voice, sweet but deadly, reached me from behind. You can lie to yourself, Michael. But can you really lie to your reflection? I turned sharply, finding her standing close, her eyes cold with pity. You're still the same. You've just put on a different mask. You know deep down that this is who you are. And when you're alone again, when the walls close in, you'll return to the bottle. You'll return to this. Her words dug under my skin, making my pulse race. I wanted to scream, to push her away, but her eyes held me in place, like they were the only thing grounding me to reality. The bartender's voice followed me like a shadow, his words laced with venom. You think this place is what traps you? No, Michael. It's you. You're the one who keeps coming back. You're the one who lets it in. I spun around to face the screen again, but the image had changed. Now I saw myself, not slouched on the couch, but in a hospital room, a pale version of me, hooked up to machines, monitors beeping around me in the quiet dark. A nurse stood nearby, her back turned, not even noticing the tear running down my cheek. Please, I whispered to no one, my breath shaky. I don't want to go back there. The bartender's voice was closer now, almost a whisper in my ear. You already have, Michael. You just don't know it yet. The image of the hospital room flickered again, and I saw Sophie's face, blurred and distant. Her expression was one of pity, but it was more than that. She looked tired of me, of everything I dragged her through. I saw the resignation in her eyes, the same look she'd had when she said goodbye. The room seemed to spin as I gripped the back of a nearby chair, trying to steady myself. I had to get out. I had to leave this place behind, leave the past behind, but it was as if I was being pulled back into it, deeper and deeper, unable to stop. You can't outrun yourself, Michael, Lydia said softly. You've been trying to do it for years, but it's not just the alcohol. It's who you are, who you've always been. I shook my head, my chest tightening. I'm not that person anymore. I'm not. The bartender chuckled darkly. Then prove it. Get up and leave. You think walking out of here will fix everything? Think again. The tension in the air was suffocating, and the more I fought it, the more it seemed to tighten around me. I glanced at the door again, but the steps I had taken toward it before felt like a lifetime ago. It was as though the door had shifted further away, pulling me deeper into the bar. Why are you doing this? I asked, my voice raw. The bartender's grin was too wide, too knowing. You're doing this, Michael. You're the one who keeps coming back to the same mistakes. Every time you think you've escaped, you find yourself in a place like this again with people like us. Lydia's gaze was unwavering, the pity in her eyes mixed with something else. Don't you want a way out? Don't you want to feel free, even if it's just for one night? Couldn't breathe. The walls seemed to close in on me, the weight of my past, my failures, everything I had tried to bury, pushing down on me. I'm not going back, I said, the words barely a whisper. But I wasn't sure if I was talking to them or to myself. The bartender gave me a sideways glance. Stop what? This is reality, Matt. The life you're so desperate to go back to. The TV blinked on again, showing me stumbling down a poorly lit street. My clothes were a mess, my face pale and drawn. I slurred something at a group of strangers, but they just ignored me, not even bothering to look my way. That's not me, I muttered, though the words felt weak as soon as they left my mouth. Oh, but it is, the bartender said, his voice coated in fake sympathy. This is where you are, Matt. Right here. Right now. This is what you're doing. The image on the screen shifted again. This time, I was in a rundown bar, surrounded by people who seemed just as lost as I felt. A woman was close to me, her lipstick smeared, her eyes glazed over. I chuckled at something she said and knocked back another drink. The sound of ice clinking in a glass broke my focus, pulling my attention back to the bartender. He held up a glass, the amber liquid catching the light. This is what you want, isn't it? The warmth, the numbness, the escape. I glanced back at the TV, a tight knot forming in my stomach. The scenes felt too real, too close to home. I could practically feel the burn of the liquor, the hollow emptiness that followed. His voice softened, almost sympathetically. Do you see it now, Matt? Fighting this is pointless. You're already here. You've already made the choice. This place? He waved his hand around the bar. It's just a little stopover. A buffer to make it easier. No, I said, barely able to speak above a whisper. I'm not doing this. I'm not drinking. The bartender chuckled, setting his glass down with a deliberate clink. Oh, Matt, you're holding the bottle right now. You think you're still standing in your kitchen, deciding whether or not to open it. No, you already have. You've already taken the first drink. I shook my head, stepping back towards the door. My heart pounded, my chest was tight. You're lying. Am I? He asked with a playful tone. Or maybe you're lying to yourself. The screen flickered again, the static filling the room before it switched to another scene. This time it was Emma. She sat in a bright cafe, phone in hand. Her face was tense, her lips tight. She was talking to someone, maybe a friend, or maybe someone more. The bartender's grin faded, and his voice turned serious. She's already moving on, Matt. You can't undo what you've done. You can't fix it, but you can stop avoiding the truth. I clenched my fists, digging my nails into my palms. What do you want from me? The bartender's smile returned. I want you to accept who you really are. Stop pretending to be someone you're not. Sit down, have a drink, and let it all go. My back hit the door. His words, the images on the screen, Lydia's soft laugh. It all felt like a heavy weight pressing down on me. You're fighting so hard, the bartender said, his voice calm, almost soothing. But for what? What's waiting for you out there, Matt? More of the same? You think you're strong enough to face it, but we both know you're not. I shook my head, swallowing the lump in my throat. You don't know me. He smirked, tilting his head slightly. Don't I? I've been with you every step of the way. Every time you reached for a drink. Every time you promised it was the last one. I was there when you made those promises and when you broke them. I'm not that person anymore. The bartender laughed, low and deep, as though I told a joke. You keep telling yourself that. But you don't really believe it, do you? He gestured to the TV, where I could see myself stumbling out of the bar, laughing loudly with the woman from before. This is who you are, Matt. This is where you belong. Stop it. I shouted, my voice echoing around the room. The other people in the bar turned to look at me again, their faces drained, blank, empty. They stared for a moment before turning back to their drinks. You can yell all you want, Lydia said, her voice soft and almost too sweet. It doesn't change anything. He's right. You've already made your choice. I turned toward her. She was leaning casually against the bar, a new drink in hand, her eyes full of malice. I haven't made any choice, I said, gritting my teeth. Really? She raised an eyebrow. Then why are you here? Why did you come to us? I started, but she cut me off. Of course you did, she said, taking a deliberate sip of her drink. You were standing in your kitchen with that bottle in your hand, hoping someone would tell you it's okay, that it's not your fault. And here we are. I shook my head, backing further toward the door. No, I didn't want this. The bartender leaned against the counter, his grin widening. Denial is funny, isn't it? You've spent your whole life running from the truth, Matt, from everything you've done, all the people you've hurt. But deep down, you know you can't outrun it. There's no forgiveness for you. His words hit harder than I wanted to admit. My mind flashed to Emma's tear-streaked face, my mom's disappointed look when I skipped another family dinner, and all the nights I'd spent drinking instead of facing my problems. The guilt hit me like a wave, making it hard to breathe. Stop, I whispered, barely able to speak. What was that? The bartender asked, cupping his ear as though he didn't hear me. Did you say something? I said stop, I yelled, my voice cracking. He let out a laugh, a sound that seemed to come from every corner of the room at once. You can't stop this, Matt. This is who you are. It's all you've ever been, and it's all you'll ever be. My legs gave out, and I slid down the door, my hands shaking as I held my head in my hands. The images on the TV blurred, flashing my worst moments in rapid succession. Lydia's voice drifted into my ear, soft, almost mocking. "You can't fight it," she murmured. "Why would you? The world out there doesn't care about you. No one's waiting for you. No one's coming to rescue you. But here we can make all that disappear." I looked up at her, my vision blurred by tears. "Why are you doing this?" She crouched down in front of me, her smile sharp, cutting through the air. "Because it's what you want, Matt. Deep down, you know it is." The bartender stepped closer, holding out a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid swirling inside. "One drink," he said, his voice low and persuasive. "Just one. That's all it takes. One drink, and all your pain will vanish." I stared at the glass, the liquid swirling like a storm. My hands ached to reach for it, to take it, to make everything stop. But then Sophie's voice rang out in my head again. "I hope you find peace, Matt." "Matt?" the bartender said gently, moving the tumbler closer to my face, the liquid catching the dim, flickering light. "This isn't defeat. It's not failure. It's mercy. You've carried enough. Why not let it all go?" His words slithered into my mind, each one heavier than the last. I glanced at the glass, then back at his face. His grin was still there, but it was sharper now, something darker lurking behind it. Lydia's voice floated in behind him, soft and piercing. "Listen to him," she cooed. "What do you have to lose? Just one drink. No one will even notice." I clenched my fists, nails digging into my knees. My chest felt like it was collapsing in on itself, my breath shallow and quick. The TV behind them still played scenes from my life. The drunk me, the careless me, the cruel me. "I don't want this," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "What was that?" the bartender asked, leaning in closer. "I don't want this," I said again, louder this time. My voice cracked, but I didn't care. I met his eyes, the glass shaking in his hand now. "You want me weak. You want me broken. That's all you've ever wanted." For just a moment, his grin faltered. It was brief, barely noticeable, but I saw it. Lydia stood up from where she'd been leaning, her smile fading as her eyes narrowed. "Be careful, Matt," she warned, her voice tight. "You're treading on dangerous ground." I forced myself up from the floor, my legs shaking but holding me steady. "You don't want to help me?" I said, my voice growing stronger. "You want me to give up. You want me to believe this is all I am." The bartender's grin returned, but now it was tight, less sure of itself. "And what else are you, Matt? Look at yourself." He gestured to the TV, where my drunken double stumbled and slurred. "You think you're better than this? You think you can fight it?" I stepped forward, fists still clenched. "I know I'm not strong enough," I admitted, my voice raw. "But I know one thing, I've still got faith. Even if that's the last thing Sophie gave me, I'm not the man I was before I met her." Lydia's smile twisted, turning into something darker, more sinister. "You think you can escape this? Escape us?" The bartender slammed the glass down onto the counter, the grin on his face cracking into something more menacing, his teeth now unnaturally sharp. "We're not some dream you can wake up from, Matt. We're you. We're in you." My heart was pounding, my hands shaking as I reached for the doorknob once again. Lydia and the bartender moved closer, their once human appearances flickering and distorting, like bad static on a screen. The air grew colder, the room darker, and their voices layered over each other in a chaotic mix of accusations and temptations. "You're nothing without us. You'll fail just like before. No one's waiting for you out there. You belong to us." I shut my eyes, gripping the doorknob until my knuckles ached. Sophie's voice echoed in my head once more, faint but steady. "I hope you find peace, Matt." With one deep breath, I twisted the knob and threw the door open. The cold night air hit me like a slap, sharp and bracing. Behind me, the noise exploded, their voices rising to a deafening roar. I stumbled backward. "Don't you leave us!" Lydia screamed, her voice warped, guttural. "You'll come back," the bartender bellowed. Their voices followed me, their shouts and laughter growing faint as I retreated. Then, suddenly, everything was quiet. The night stood still, save for the sound of my heavy breathing. I was standing in my kitchen, the door to the bar nowhere in sight. The whiskey bottle was still in my hand, the cap screwed tightly on. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at my distorted reflection in the glass. My face was pale, drawn, a shadow of the man I used to be. My thumb brushed the label, and for the first time, I didn't feel that familiar pull. I set the bottle down on the counter and turned away, my legs unsteady but holding me up. The cold air still clung to my skin, a quiet reminder of where I'd been, what I'd faced. Almost every night, I still hear the sounds of that bar in my head. I can still hear the bartender pushing me forward. But I know now, I'm not alone in saying no. I'm not alone in putting up the fight. The devil will always call us to his rag and bone shop, but we've got to keep saying no. Whatever's served at that bar will follow us to the grave.